these corals were small, tiny
1
1 millimeter larvae, and you have grown them up here very, very successfully.
They're very tasty, they're very helpless, they're a very welcome snack on the reef.
Not be any water left in this tank.
The bigger the coral is, the more eggs are released and the more sperm are released, and that's a ginormous amount of fat.
It's unbelievable for a hobby enthusiast like me to see something like that. Hello and welcome to Sea Friendly Reef and to a new video here on that little channel. Today we are in Wilhelmshaven, and maybe you can film right outside so we can have a look at the beautiful, beautiful German weather today. -1 degree. Perfect for a video in a coral farm today. So let me introduce Maureen and Sam from the university here in Wilhelmshaven, but the university is called Oldenburg, isn't it?
Exactly.
Hi, I'm Maureen. I'm a scientist here at the University of Oldenburg. This is Sam, who is also a scientist here. And this is the aquarium facility of the University of Oldenburg, but especially the working group Environmental Biochemistry of Professor Peter Schupp. This is all a coral aquarium facility or a tropical aquarium facility, but the research focus of our working group is not just corals, but also deep sea, a lot of microbial work, cold water, North Sea, but in here we only have the tropical coral reef organisms.
And we have to say something very important. It is not about the aquarium hobby scene here. So
Yes.
we're talking about science stuff. You are researching in multiple ways, breeding corals for restocking.
We have a lot of different research interests in corals. So we did a lot of different work over the years looking at effects that like we humans have, like sedimentation, temperature, all kinds of effects that we have on corals, how the effects influence the corals, especially the juvenile corals. This is really what we are very interested in. The juvenile corals are very different than adult corals, and this is kind of our piece of interest that we have.
And in my opinion, it is so great to have these guys here on the channel, because I think it would be nice to have that also for the aquarium hobby one day. Maybe this can be possible, but I want to give you a little insight into that facility here, and maybe you can see it. We do not have that much space here, so I will pick you up. I will show some pictures, and then we start directly into the topic.
We have a lot of different interests. One interest that we have is the coral larval settlement. So the corals spawn and release the eggs and sperm into the water column, and then the embryos develop into a little tiny larvae that have to find their spot on the sea floor where they grow and they can't move afterwards. So the decision on where the larvae settles is extremely important, and we want to find out, okay, what is it that brings those little larvae to settle in a specific place? We research quite a lot of it, the biofilms and the individual chemical compounds that induce the settlement in the coral larvae. To actually go on with our research, we have to create coral larvae, right? So we actually have coral spawnings here in our facility, and these are actually juvenile corals that are completely grown here in Germany. So these are Acropora tenuis that we had spawn here, and they are now 2 years old, created from coral larvae that we had settled on those little tiles.
Guys, just for giving you an idea how amazing this project is, we're talking about corals which are not fracked like usual, like we know this from many shops doing this in a successful way. These corals were small, tiny
1
millimeter larvae, and you have grown them up here very successfully. And this is, it's unbelievable for a hobby enthusiast like me to see something like that. I hope you can see how important this type of science is for the future, because in my opinion it is in 10, 15, 20 years completely usual to do it in this way.
Especially the research that we do with coral larvae settlement has begun in Guam, where our professor Peter Schupp, he was already working as a professor in Guam for many years, and we started collaborating with him in 2010 for our bachelor thesis back then. And so it has been a really long time in the works. To achieve this kind of settlement work, we really have to combine a lot of different kinds of knowledge in our working group. We of course need the aquaristic knowledge to just keep the corals happy in here, but of course we need the scientific background, we need the chemical background to combine all of these things to actually achieve the successful coral larval settlement.
We have a very interesting type of aquarium here. I mean, maybe you have to know we have a huge community in the marine design and aquascaping hobby area. So I think this is not the typical way to scape a reef tank normally in a living room. Maybe you can talk a little bit about it, what you created here.
Yeah, this is definitely not your typical reef tank as you see it in a home aquarium. This has just been basically left alone to a lot of parts. So there's like no reef rock in here or anything. This is all grown coral that has kind of started to overgrow this coral tank. And as you can see here, this has been like, this was all coral that died off. And here you can see kind of how a natural reef develops. You can see here the sponges growing in the darker areas. You can see a lot of different kinds of little critters that live also in the coral reef. So it's kind of an interesting aquarium to show also to students what a reef looks like even in the deeper areas.
It's super interesting because normally small islands, for example, are created in that way, isn't it? You have a coral, then the coral is overgrown from another coral, and the skeleton is left there.
Exactly, they create a three-dimensional structure. You can really see it here, and you can also see it here on the top. The corals really grow up to the surface area, and of course they can't grow over it, but there you kind of see the creation of an atoll. And we actually had to cut out a lot of times already, because otherwise there would not be any water left in this tank. So we just cut out a little bit in the front, but we kind of try to leave it alone.
And you have your small, lonely mangrove over there for showing the island style. Yeah,
exactly,
okay,
it's a bit how like an island is created and mangroves are starting to grow. It has not come here naturally, but...
Also, not the typical reef hobbyist style. The shape of a reef tank here is that one. You have quite interesting Montiporas here.
Here you can finally see that it's definitely not like a show aquarium. This is corals we work with. This is Montipora, and we create little discs of these to test them in experiments. There we do experiments with different toxicological compounds, and we do ecotoxicological testing on corals, and we try to create a system that is really reliable and that can that always gives you the same results, and that can be tested with a variety of different chemical compounds, because we actually know very little about what chemical compounds that us people put in the oceans do, especially with corals. Of course we have some knowledge, but very, very little, much less than you would expect. One of our goals is to get much better knowledge about this.
So you cut out these small holes here out of the Montipora to have equal pieces from the same coral for doing some tests regarding to temperature and toxic, that you have the perfect reference?
We try to create always kind of the same coral piece that is kind of standardized. If you always have like different shapes and stuff, it's a bit more difficult to get the data that we want, and also to always have the same result basically, which is important, that it is reproducible, your results. So that is an idea we came up with, and that works quite well.
My research focus is coral biology, but I'm part of the environmental biochemistry. And my wife, Marine, already told you about our working group, the environmental biochemistry, that has a vast array of research topics, but I'm located in the coral biology, basically. I'm the guy in charge of this facility here. I have been in charge for 10 years now, and I give my best to not only keep the corals happy and growing, but also reproduce them. And that brings me to a research project that has been going on for quite a while. And we'll go into more detail, but let's first do a little tour of the facility so you know where we are working actually.
Great idea, Sam.
The whole facility has a volume of about 6,500 liters. It's one recirculating system. We have, of course, a sump tank that contains all the essentials, basically like skimmer, particulate filter, dosing systems, activated charcoal, main pump, etc. So nothing fancy. It's basically regular coral aquaculture.
Just like we know it from the hobby scene.
Exactly. Just maybe a bit bigger, but I'm sure there is many hobbyists that have much bigger facilities than we have.
And if you know that maybe from science, you do not always have the finance background, I would say, for building reef tanks we sometimes have on that channel here with the high-end, super expensive stuff. And I think it's a great point to mention that you do not need that. You do not need that for successful reefing. So we see here a fleece filter, a skimmer, some carbon and dosing system, and that's it. And yeah, maybe we have to think about that more often.
Exactly, yeah. It doesn't always have to be super fancy. You can see our dosing system is a bit of a makeshift arrangement, but it has been running successfully for more than 10 years. For the dosing, we do the classical bulling system with the addition of the A and K elements. At night, we dose Kalkwasser to balance out the pH a bit, so that has been a very successful way to run our facility. So the whole facility consists of 5 rows of aquaria in which we can run different experiments. I'm not going to go into detail of all the experiments. Marin already told you about the toxicological experiments, for instance, but we also run experiments on heat stress to see how heat resilient corals can be. One aspect that is really important for our research is the juvenile corals. So the juvenile or baby corals, they are much different from their parents physiologically. So of course, they're more sensitive to certain stressors because they're small, they're very tasty, they're very helpless, they're a very welcome snack on the reef, basically. But if they grow up in the early phases, they're also more plastic, so they have more ways to, within a certain range, of course, to acclimate and adapt to new conditions. And that is what is really interesting for us. And that gives us a little bit of hope that maybe not everything is lost in the future and that coral reefs may persist beyond this century. So we're working in that area as well. Now I talked a bit about what we do with the juvenile corals and with the larvae, and Marin already told you about the settlement process. But to get these larvae, you need to get corals to spawn. Either you go in the field to the mass spawning events, which we did in the past many times since 2010, but then suddenly there was a pandemic and there was no travel, but we still wanted to keep on working with these juvenile corals.
Also
right?
in Germany we had a pandemic, okay.
Yeah, well, we did.
No,
as far as I remember, there was something and there's a bit of a blur, but yeah. So there was no travel anymore and we needed or wanted to continue our research. Then the idea came up, why not do it here? And luckily, our great colleague Jamie Craigs from Horniman Museum in London, all of you know him, I'm very sure of that, or probably all of you. He was the first to actually spawn corals successfully in an artificial environment just a few years prior. I think it was 2013 or 14, and he has been doing that with great success ever since. We thought, why not do it here as well? In the facility we have here, that's not quite possible, so we need another facility. And luckily, with the generous help of Tropic Marin, we could start a project about coral reproduction here in Wilhelmshaven and obtain such a facility.
The whole facility is running with Tropic Marin, isn't it?
Yeah. So most of the products we use here to run our facilities, like chemicals for the bulling system, the A and K elements, also fish food, we use the Omega Vital a lot. And of course, our whole facility is running on the Pro Reef salt from Tropic Marin and has been running for many years now in a very successful way.
I have one question. Is it possible to do things like that also in a private reef tank? So maybe some of you guys also have some spawning effects of corals suddenly at night. It could be happen, but is it possible to have these juveniles maybe in a sump or in a frag tank next to your home reef tank and to rise them up?
So of course there's the chance that you may have a spontaneous spawning of corals. We had that in that facility here as well, but it's not predictable, so you don't know if you don't simulate a yearly cycle with a seasonality. You have literally no idea when your corals or if your corals are going to spawn. So there is a chance they may spawn, but then after the spawning, when the eggs and sperm are in the water, basically the whole system of an aquarium as we run it here is kind of a death trap for all these eggs and sperm. And one thing to add, the bigger the coral is, the more eggs are released and the more sperm are released, and that's a ginormous amount of fat and protein that you don't necessarily want to have in your system. If there's a spawning, I recommend to be there in the same room.
How can I imagine? Is the whole water cloudy or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, basically. To talk more about the coral spawning, we will do a little excursion to our second facility. I can tell you more about the coral reproduction project that we have been running for a couple of years now with the support of Tropic Marin.
Guys, maybe you're watching from Florida or from a warmer country. So in Germany in December, it is not that funny. And especially in that part of Germany, isn't it, Sam?
Yeah, the snow we see here, the winter wonderland, is not the standard for December. Usually it's just above freezing and gray skies and non-stop rain. So it's actually a quite nice break from that. Anyways, but enough of the German winter. I would suggest we enter the Australian summer.
Yes, that is the best idea you ever had, in my opinion.
All right, just in time before the sun is setting.
You can see it. I do not see anything here. Just one second. We are now in a ship container, isn't it?
Exactly. Welcome to our shipping container, our new facility. This container was actually outfitted and built by Coral Spawning Lab. It's a company that is run by Jamie Craggs and Vincent Thomas. It's located in London, and they made this possible. So as I mentioned, the pandemic hit, there was no travel anymore, the research need to go on. And so we thought, hey, let's just ask the best in the field, and they can set up this. So that's what they did, and then the shipping container went on an actual ship and found its way across the North Sea to us here in Wilhelmshaven.
All the corals give their spawnings into the water, and then you of course have to catch them out.
Exactly. So once the night has arrived and they're spawning, you need to be present actually, because if you imagine the big Acropora austera down here, the green giant that spawned in October, and the amount of eggs that comes out of a colony like that is mind-blowing actually. If you're not there to catch all that and remove it from the system, the amount of fat and proteins is not going to do a favor to your system stability.
What do you guess? How many eggs can a coral like this produce in one night?
Millions.
Millions?
Yeah.
Wow, crazy.
Definitely, I would say millions. So what we do is we collect the eggs and the sperm, we fertilize them outside of the aquarium, and then we transfer the embryos in specific containers to grow out the larvae. That's a process that takes about a week until the larvae have developed, and then we can use them for our experiments and for the grow out later on.
I can imagine that maybe some of you are thinking right now, okay, that shouldn't be that difficult. But maybe, Sam, you can talk a little bit about the hardest parts of keeping those small larvae alive and bring them into the next level.
It's not the easiest job. Okay, so the spawning happens, that's great and all, but that's when the work starts basically. So once you have the larvae, or you first need the embryos to develop into larvae, which is not the easiest task as well. But then settlement is a big topic, and then once they're settled, they have to grow through different phases, take up symbionts, take up the right bacteria, and they're very, very vulnerable in the first weeks and months. So it can be a very frustrating undertaking to try to grow out corals in that way. The systems you see here, all three independent systems, are run basically in the same way as our main facility.
This was unbelievable, interesting. Sam, thank you so much
My
for
pleasure.
all this information. Of course, you cannot talk about everything, I know,
Yeah.
so we have some secrets we have to keep. I think all of you can understand that, because it is a huge amount of time you all are spending for that project here, or for that science. So I hope you all can understand that. But if you have got some questions, feel free to write them down into the comments. Sam and me, we both, I do not have your knowledge, but I will try to answer some of these, but maybe you can help me there.
Yeah, we can communicate in that way, of course.
Perfect.
Yeah.
For more informations, you can also check out the Tropic Marin YouTube channel, because we are filming also in some more specific laboratory areas, not only here in the shipping container. So feel free to check it out too. Thanks a lot. Maybe you give us a like, and if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, do it right now. It is worth it, and we all are going to see us again next week. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you guys. Thanks, Toby.
Thank you, man.
See you around.